Welcome to Lesson 12 in the Biblical Bible Study series. This lesson is entitled Connect the Dots. Here we're going to look back at a couple of passages that we've already considered. Matthew 19:4, and he answered and said unto them, Have ye not read that he which made them at the beginning made them male and female? And Matthew 12:3 and 5. But he said unto them, Have ye not read what David did when he was an hungered, and they that were with him? Or have ye not read in the law how that on the Sabbath days the priests in the temple profane the Sabbath and are blameless? But here we consider the fact that there may have been another reason why they were unfamiliar with these passages. They may have read what David did when he was hungry, but not made the connection between that and how they were observing the Sabbath. They didn't connect David and the folks with him eating the showbread, the old showbread that was being removed from the table of showbread, and was only lawful for the priest to eat. They didn't connect that regulation and the exception that was made here for hungry people in need. They didn't make the connection between the events in that passage and how they were observing the Sabbath. They probably were familiar with God making a man and a woman and joining them together, but they didn't connect it with their personal doctrine of marriage and divorce. And this is sadly fairly common among believers today. Many Christians read the Bible, they're familiar with its stories and principles, but they don't connect what they read to their everyday lives. We're going to talk more about this. We have a whole section in the book, and we'll have a series of videos where we talk about how to connect what you read with your day-to-day life, how to be a doer of the Word. But it happens often, I'm afraid, that people fail in that respect. Here are a couple of keys that we'll look at more in depth later on, but we'll give you enough to get started with here. One is comparing Scripture with Scripture. That is, try to find out how the rest of the Bible speaks about the passage that you are reading. This is where a good concordance or something like the treasury of Scripture knowledge comes in really handy. By comparing Scripture with Scripture, you can see what principles other Bible authors drew from the passage that you're reading. You can see commentary about how it turned out in later books. And so comparing Scripture with Scripture is one way to connect the dots. And another way to connect the dots is meditating. For example, I was reading Galatians and my attention got focused on Galatians 2:20. I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless, I live. Yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. And the life that I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. And I didn't really work to memorize that passage, but I did spend a week holding it up to the light and saying, what does this look like, the life of Christ being lived through me in my marriage, with my children, on the job, at church, as a citizen of my country, Christ living through me. How does that impact how I think, what I watch, how I entertain myself? And spent a week just turning that over. And again, I didn't just sit and stare at the ceiling for a week. What I'm saying is I read it, but I would carry it with me through the day. And while I drove, I would think about it. And in quiet moments during the day, I would call it to mind and look at it from a different perspective. And it helped me to connect the dots, to see how the principles of that passage should be worked out in my day-to-day life. Well, just a few tips to get you started. More to come. Thank you for being with us again. Like and subscribe. It's a big help.